Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Nazir daf Mem Hey. We're about a little further than halfway down on Mem Daled Amabet. And we are, let me share my screen, and we are picking up with the second half of a new topic, but related to the topic that we just had. That when we ended this day yesterday, I said that we would begin today with a discussion of the restrictions of a Tameh person entering the Beit HaMikdash. So there are a couple of points of background that are worth noting. So first is the nature of the three camps that the Jewish people had in the Midbar, in the wilderness, and the corresponding to them, the three areas in and around the Beit HaMikdash. So first you have the Mishkan / Ohel Moed, which corresponds to the Kodesh and Kodesh HaKodashim. That's the building, the structure, along with the courtyard of it. So that's the entire Mishkan structure. So you had an inner building that was covered in skins, and then you had a courtyard around that was effectively fenced in. That was the full Mishkan and Ohel Moed area. And corresponding to that, you have the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim in the Beit HaMikdash. Those are the building structures that are effectively at the focal point of our of the Beit HaMikdash. And then you had a courtyard around it where you would slaughter animals, and where there was an altar, a mizbeach, on which the animals would be sacrificed. And of course, there was a golden altar inside the Kodesh, inside one of the buildings, or inside the building. So now, so that's that is the first area, and only those who were fully pure, only the tahor, could enter that area. Then you had the Levite camp. So that was where the Leviim and Moshe were dwelling in the wilderness, and corresponding to that is the total Har Habayit. That's the total Temple Mount, and that includes the gates that would the frames of the gates that would lead into the inner courtyard. And in that area, those who are Tameh Mate are allowed to enter, but a Zav or a Zava, somebody, a male or woman who had some kind of flow, they would not be able to enter that area. And then finally, we have the rest of the Israelite camp. So there, a Zav and a Zav could enter, but a Mitzorah could not enter. And so outside of those camps, outside of all three camps, that's where a Mitzorah was required to stay. So you have Mitzorah who goes outside all of them, a Zav or Zava who has to be outside the Levite camp, and a Tameh Mate who has to be outside the Mishkan / Ohel Moed. So those are the three camps and where people need to go, and that's going to be relevant for our discussion today. The second piece of background is the rules associated with a Zav. Zav is a man who has a discharge, and that if the person sees the discharge for one day, well, then he goes to the mikveh next day, as long as he's not still seeing any discharge, and then after night he is tahor. On the other hand, assuming that he does not see any additional discharge, if a man sees two discharges within 2 consecutive days, then he needs to wait 7 clean days, and then he'll go to the mikvah on the 7th clean day, and after nightfall, again, assuming no further discharges, he is tahor. Finally, if a person sees 3 discharges, then within 3 consecutive days, then he's going to need to wait 7 clean days, go to the mikvah on day 7th, and then offer a sacrifice on the 8th day. So in each of these cases, after going to the mikvah but before nightfall, the man is referred to as a Tovul Yom. The point is that he's gone to the mikvah, he's been Tovel that day, but it has not yet been nightfall, so his full tahara process has not completed. And then in addition, if if somebody in the third case where the person also needs to offer sacrifices, as long as he has not offered the sacrifices, he is called a mechusar kapara, somebody who is missing the final atonement. And so that is all going to be relevant in our discussion. So again, we're going to, and why is this all brought here? Well, on some level, it's brought here because we're talking about Tuma and Tara. But we'll also, during the course of this discussion, quote a verse regarding a Nazir to teach us rules about the entering into the various areas of the Beit HaMikdash. And so as a result, since that's a verse that we have been quoting, so we put this Gemara right here to talk about it further. So let's take a look. So Amar Abaye, we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines up. The second word on the line is Amar Abaye. So Amar Abaye, Ashkachtinu Alechavre de Rav Nasan Bar Hoshaya de Yasvin V'Ka'amrin. I happened upon to see the people, these friends of Rav Nasan Bar Hoshaya. They were all sitting and they were talking about the following brisa. Uva lifnei Hashem el Pesach o Moed unisanam el Kohen. That when it comes to a zav, and this is a pasuk in Vayikra, it says that the person is going to come before Hashem to the entrance of the Ohel Moed and give or give them to the Kohen, and them here refers to the sacrifices. So he's going to give his sacrifices to the Kohen. So what does this teach us? So this teaches Bisman Shehu Tavo, Amasaihu. When is it that he's allowed to do this, right? Because again, he's going to the entrance of the tent of meeting. He's going to the entrance of the Ohel Moed, which is in, the entrance is in the Levite camp. So Bisman Shehu Taval V'Asaha Erev Shemesh in Lo Taval V'Lo V'Asaha Erev Shemesh Lo. So when is he allowed to go into the Levite camp in order to approach this gate and give his sacrifices to the Kohen who is inside the Beit HaMikdash structure, or inside the inner courtyard? So then it's only when he has gone to the mikveh and the sun has set. But before that, as a reminder, he's a zav, and a zav is not allowed to go into the Levite camp, is not allowed to go into the outer courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash and approach the gates of Nicanor, the Shar Nicanor. So this is telling us that only when the person has been has done tefillah and the sun has set, that is when he's allowed to go and bring his korbanot. And this is obviously talking about somebody who needed to bring korbanot. So this was referring to somebody who offered who's offering sacrifices. So this is somebody who saw 3 discharges, and so that's why they are also obligated to offer sacrifices. And so that's what the brisa says. And now the fellows who are sitting there, they say, Alma kasavar tavul yom shel zav kizav dami. Well, that shows that somebody who is a tavul yom, meaning that they haven't gone to the mikveh, is like their azav. And the implication of that,
and they have gone to the mikveh.
I'm sorry, the person has gone to the mikveh, even though even though they have gone to the mikveh, because the night has not yet fallen, they are still considered to be like a zav, even though they've gone to the mikveh, but it hasn't been nightfall yet. And presumably, they are saying that this is understood to mean that even somebody who only saw 2 discharges would also be treated this same way. And so that is what Abaye is now going to challenge. Amina lahon ana. So I told them, Ela me'ata, based on this lesson that you are trying to say, Gabi Nazir Tameh Nami, when it comes to a Nazir Tameh, we also have a similar pasuk. Diksiv El HaKohen El Pesach Ohel Moed. Again, it says that the Kohen needs to bring his sacrifices. I'm sorry, not the Kohen, that the Nazir Tameh needs to bring his sacrifices to the entrance of the Ohel Moed, and namely in this case to the Shar Nikanor, give them to the Kohen, and the Kohen will take them. Well, Amasai Huva, when is he permitted to come to the gate to the Shar Nikanor inside the Levite camp, based on this lesson that the friends of Rav Nassan Bar Hoshaya were saying? Bisman Shetavo Ba'asa Ha'erev Shemesh. Presumably, he needs to have that the sun has set, and that he has gone to the mikveh, and after that the sun has set. But that's not true, because even before this Tamei Nazir goes even to the mikveh, he's allowed to approach the Shar Nikanor. He's allowed to approach the gates of Nikanor, because the gates of Nikanor are in the Levite camp, and the Levite camp is only prohibited to a Zav or a Mitzorah. It's not prohibited to somebody who is just Tamei Mate. And so as a result, your lesson doesn't seem to apply, meaning if the words are teaching what you're saying, it doesn't work, because Mikdei Shari Nikanor Heicha Kaiman, where are those gates of Nikanor? They are B'Sharei Lavia. They are in the Levite camp. V'Hatanya Tamei Mate Mutar Likanes B'Machane Levia. Somebody who is Tamei Mate is allowed to enter the Levite camp. The low Tamei Mate Bilvad. Not only can a Tamei Mate, not only since somebody who's Tamei enter that camp, Elafilu Mate Atzmo, even the dead corpse itself is allowed to enter the Levite camp. And how do I know that? Because when we had Moshe taking the bones of Yosef, it says, Shenemar vayikach Moshe es atzmos Yosef imo. He took them with him. Well, my imo, what does it mean that he took him with him? Imo b'mechitza, so they stayed with him in his camp. Imo b'machane levia. So clearly, we cannot use. It cannot be that the words Ela Kohen El Petach Ohel Moed teach us the concept that actually until the person has gone to the mikveh and night has fallen, they're not able to enter that area. Ella, therefore, what does Abaye suggest? Tavul Yom Shel Zav Lav Kizav Dami. If you have a Tavul Yom that's like a Zav, a Tvul Yom of a Zav, that it does not require sacrifices. That's an important way to understand this. They're not like a Zav. They are not comparable to a full-fledged Zav, and therefore they are allowed to enter into the Levite camp. However, and by the way, Tosos adds the word lav here, and so we're going to follow Tosos's girsa, where it says Tvul Yom Shel Zav Lav Kizav Dami, and so now Vavilu Haki Kavan Demuchusar Kapara Lo Ayel. But what is the issue? Who is it that is not able to enter the camp? Only a Mechusar Kapara. So only somebody who has not entered, who also has to offer sacrifices. So in that situation, if they are Tavul Yom, because they are lacking both Ha'erev Shemesh, both the sun setting and the sacrifices that will be brought on the 8th day, then that's the person who cannot enter the Levite camp. And that's what we should learn. Now, how do I know that we're talking about somebody who can't go into the that he can't go into the Levite camp? Why did they bother to refer to the Ohel Moed in this situation? Just as somebody who is mechusar kapara, somebody who is gone to the mikvah but is waiting for the night to fall, is not allowed to enter the actual Ohel Moed. So as a result, so too somebody who has not only not gone to the mikvah, who has gone to the mikvah but has not had Ha'erev Shemesh, if in fact when they are a Zav, that if they are both Mechusar Kapara and a Tavul Yom, they also can't go in to the Levite camp. So how do we know that in fact both a Tvul Yom and a Mechusar Kapara can't enter the Ohel Moed itself? Because we've got a brisa, Titania Tameh Yeh, that the person will be Tameh. This is a pasuk in connection with somebody going into the Mishkan when they're Tameh. It's from Bamidbar Yotet. It's in connection with the Para Aduma commandment, and so we say in Parshas Kukat, and it first says Tameh Yeh, that the person will be shall be Tameh. So what does that say? L'rabot Tvul Yom. That tells us that that even though a person has done their entire Tahara process and all they need to wait for is nightfall, they still can't enter the Beit Hamikdash. Ode to Matobo. Moreover, that same pasuk, which reads in full. Let's read the pasuk in full. The pasuk says, let me just find the pasuk. The pasuk says, "Kol anogeh b'mei b'nefesh ha'adam asher yamut lo yitchata et mishkan Hashem timei v'nichrasa nefesh ha'im Yisrael kimei nida lo zorek alav tamei yeh o tumatovo." So we have these two statements that really aren't necessary. Tamei yeh and then o tumatovo. So tamei yeh says that it teaches us that even if the person is a Tvul Yom, he should not go into the Ohel Moed itself, should not go into the temple courtyard, the inner courtyard of the temple, and then O Tumatovo, the additional words of O Tumatovo, L'Rabba Mechusar Kapara, that teaches us that somebody who's lacking a atonement also can't go into the to the Ohel Moed, namely the Beit HaMikdash and the inner courtyard. So now that we've covered all that, and again, the reason that we have that here is because we talked about a Nazir in this discussion, but now we're ready to continue with the conclusion ritual. So we've
Before you go on, I have a question.
Yep.
Yeah, so this discussion would seem to impact on the permissibility today of ascending the Temple Mount.
Yes.
When one has only just gone to the mikvah.
Correct. That if one goes to the mikvah, and so as a result, the only tuma in which they have is tamei, then one ostensibly would be allowed to go up to much of the Temple Mount that exists today. The issue is that we don't know precisely where the Beit HaMikdash stood, and so as a result, one would need to avoid going into that area where the Temple Mount precisely was, and so as a result, that is sort of like the complicating factor, and of course one of the reasons why many suggest not to go up there in the first place. But the reason that you see, especially today, many going up there is based exactly on your comment, Charlie, that in fact people can go up there as long as they avoid the area that is as long as they've gone to the mikvah and had Ha'ar Shemesh, and they avoid going into the areas of the inner courtyard, the Kodesh or the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So
I've heard Rabbi Linzer express concern that some of the tour guides who take people to Temple Mount take people who have just gone to the mikvah that morning rather than the day before.
Yeah, that would seem to me to be a problem, because then they would be a Tvul Yom,
right?
And so now again, even the Tvul Yom, right? This actually would suggest that a Tvul Yom, depending on whether or not they were a Zav who was Mechusar Kapara. So if there is Zav who was Mechusar Kapara, so as a result, so then then that going to the mikveh is not sufficient. They would need the Har of Shemesh. But if in fact they were only tamei because of Baal Keri, because of a normal seminal emission, or because of and Tameh mate, so or a Nida, and they've been to the mikvah at the appropriate time for them as a Nida. Well, then in those situations, presumably even during the daytime, one would be allowed to go, because again, the Tavul Yom is allowed generally, as we just saw, to enter the outer areas, and so there's no real difference from that perspective between a Tavul Yom and a non-Tavul Yom. So the only problem would be a Tavul Yom where the person was a Zub, and that gets into very private questions, and so maybe that also could provide an explanation for why we should not be doing this.
Thanks.
Okay, so now we've finished the talking about the prohibitions generally, and now we're ready to discuss, and we've discussed the prohibition of shaving, and now we turn to the shaving at the end of the Nazirut and to the concluding ritual more generally. So Tiglachas HaTahara Ketzad, how do we do this conclusion shaving? So Haya, and specifically the one done by somebody who is Tahor. So again, we differentiate between a Nazir Tahor and a Nazir Tameh. When we have a Tiglachas Tahara, that's referring to the shaving that's done by a Nazir at the very end of their Nazirut. Whereas a Tiglachas Tameah, that's talking about where the Nazir became Tameh in the middle of their Nazirut. They're going to have to redo their count from the very beginning. But as part of the Tahara process, as part of the process of becoming Tahor again, they will need to shave. So it's important to remember the difference between those two kinds of shaving. So Tiglachas Tahara Ketzad. How do we do the shaving at the end of the period where somebody has made it through and has not become Tameh during the course of their Nazirut, or at least during the course of the counting of the days of their Nazirut, the formal counting? So Haya, maybe Gimel Behemot Chatat, Ola Ushlamim. He would bring 3 animals, one as a sin offering, one as an Ola, all burnt to Hashem, and one as a Shlamim. That would be, part would be burnt for Hashem, part would be eaten by the people who brought it, and part would go to the Kohanim. The Shochet es Hashlamim, once he has slaughtered the Shlamim, Migaleach alayim, he's allowed to then shave immediately thereafter. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. And the implication is that Rabbi Yehuda is saying that the shlamim should be the first one offered, and that way you can immediately shave. Rabbi Elazar Omer, lo haya megaleach ela ala chatas. No, Rabbi Elazar says, no, you have to do the chatas first. And that's when you shave. Because in general, the sin, as we have elsewhere, the sin offering comes before other offerings. And so therefore, you need to offer the sin offering first. So ve'im gilach al achas mishalash tan yatsa. But if you did the sacrifices after in any other order, and you shaved after any of the sacrifices, that's okay. You don't have to do it over again. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Hevi Gimel Behemoth Lo Perish. If you have 3 animals that you set up to do the sacrifices, but you didn't say which one was which, well, the good news for you is Haru'uya lechatas tikriv lechatas. The one that was fit for a chatas should be offered for a chatas. La'ola tikriv ola, l'shlamim tikriv shlamim. So the one that's fit for an ola goes as an ola, and the one who's fit for a shlamim goes as a shlamim. And it makes a ton of sense, because if we take a look at the Mefarish, the very end of the Mishnah, end of the 3 lines up in the narrow lines on the right-hand side of the page. So haru'uya lechatas, the one that's fit for a chatas. Well, how do I know that it's fit for a chatas? Kigon kivsa nekeva bat shnata. So you're talking about a female lamb that is a year old. Haru'uya la'ola, and what about the one that's fit for an ola? Well, kevez zachar ben shnasa. Ben shnasa. Well, that's got to be a 1-year-old lamb that's male. So v'haru'uya l'shlamim, and what about the shlamim? Well, ayol ben shtei shanim. Well, that's got to be a 2-year-old ram. So the point is that each of these karbanot are offered from different animals, and so as a result, the good news for somebody who has not specified which animal is for which offering is that basically they have to be used and for the particular offerings that that are relevant. And so as a result, even if you did not, even though you just said that these three animals should be my animals for my post Nazirut sacrifices, it's clear which one goes for which. And so you don't need to have specified, and you can just go ahead and offer them. So that is our Mishnah. Now the Gemara begins with a brisa that supports Rabbi Yehuda. So let's take a look and we'll see. Tana Rabbanan, the Gilach HaNazir Pesach Ohel Moed. So we say that the Nazir is going to shave at the beginning, at the opening of the Ohel Moed. So Bishlamim HaKasav Medaber. It must be that this is referring to a shlamim, and not, because of course the literal understanding is that literally the person should have their head shaved at the opening of the Ohel Moed. But we're going to use essentially a Gzeira Shava to show that in fact it is really referring to the Korban Shlamim. Shenemar ushchato Pesach Ohel Moed, because when it comes to a Shlamim, it is slaughtered at the entrance of the Ohel Moed, because it does not require a specific location to be slaughtered. It can be slaughtered in lots of different locations. Unlike other sacrifices, which, for example, may need to be sacrificed in the north. So, Ata Omer Bishlamim HaKasav Medaber. So the brisa continues. You're telling me that it means that it's referring to a shlamim. Oh, Einu El Pesach Ohel Moed Mamash. How do I know? How did you know to say that it doesn't mean that the person actually needs to be shaved in that location? Well, Amarta Im Kain Derech B'Zayin. I would tell you that if you did that, this would be a very embarrassing thing for the Beit HaMikdash. And so as a result, we don't want to do that because that would be inappropriate. So that's approach number one. This Tanakama says that we know that it can't mean actual shaving because it's just plain inappropriate. So Amart Im Kain Derech B'Zayin. Again, if you were to actually do that and say that it means literally shaving at the opening of the Beit HaMikdash, well, then that would be very degrading to the Beit HaMikdash. And so as a result, based on logic, we can say that it can't mean actual shaving. It must mean something else. And since the language is the same by a shlamim, we'll say that it is referring to a shlamim. And again, Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah was the one who said that you shochet on the shlamim, that you slaughter on the shlamim. So presumably the shlamim is the first one, and you would sacrifice. You would be able to shave your head once that happened. And you can see the tying. This would also explain why Rabbi Yehuda says what he says, because there's a connection between shaving and the slaughtering of the shlamim. Rabbi Yoshia Omer Einot Tzara. Rabbi Yoshia says you don't need to think about it from a logical perspective. We have something even better, because Hare Amra Torah Lo Ta'aleh B'Ma'alot Al Mizbechi. We actually have almost like a Kal V'chomer. Really, it's a Kal V'chomer that tells us that you can't possibly shave in the Beit HaMikdash. Because what does it say about the Beit HaMikdash? It says that at the end of Parshas Yisro, it says you can't go up to the Mizbeach using steps. You need to have a ramp to go up to the Beit HaMikdash, because Hashem doesn't want us to even show any amount of skin in connection with walking. And so Kal V'chomer l'derech b'zayon, certainly something as disgraceful as shaving one's head would not be permitted. So that's approach number two. Now, as a quick aside, the Gemara quotes a brisa. This is definitely something that was added much later into the Gemara. Nusach achar b'midrash parsha naso. There's another variation of this text that is in the Midrash Rabbah of Parshas Naso. Because what does it say there? V'gilach HaNazir. The Nazir is going to shave. Rabbi Yoshia Omer b'shlamim HaKasav Medaber. It must be that the pasuk is telling us about a shlamim. Oh, Eino, maybe you would say that it doesn't talk about that. Im kach Amra Torah lo ta'aleh. But the Torah says that you can't go up the steps. So Kal V'chomer l'davar shelo yigalech Pesach Ohel Moed. Well, then certainly you shouldn't shave in front of the Ohel Moed. Ela b'shlamim HaKasav Medaber. So therefore, it must be talking about the shlamim. So again, same basic person, same basic logic, slightly different approach, but the bottom line is the same, that we see Rabbi Yoshia learns from the idea as a kal v'chomer from the fact that you shouldn't have steps. So now that we did that brief aside, so Rabbi Yitzchak Omer ain't a tzara. Rabbi Yitzchak says you don't even need to use a kal v'chomer. We could use something even better, because we could use the words of the psukim themselves to show that you cannot shave in that location. Because harehu omer, what does the Torah say? V'lakach es ar rosh nizro, the Nazir should take the hair from his Nazir head, the nasan al haish, and put it on the fire. Well, which fire is it that he's supposed to put it on? Well, that's a very key point, and everybody agrees that this is not the fire of the Mizbeach. This is referring to the fire where the shlamim is being cooked, and so that's an important point. And so Misha Einu Mechusar El Lakicha Unasina. Well, that tells us that what do we need to do in order to get this hair to the fire? All we need to do is take it and put it. Yatza zeh, but if in fact you were to shave the hair at the entrance to the inner courtyard, well, then you would not just be able to take it and to put it, but rather then the person would be missing both, would be missing not only the taking, but he would be missing bringing hava unasina. But the pasuk doesn't reference hava, and we can see in the Rush says this very nicely, explains this very nicely. 1, 2, 3, 8 lines up in the narrow lines of the Rush in Memheyam and Aleph on the left-hand column of the page. V'lo mishum mechusar lakicha hava unasina, because it's not somebody who's missing lakicha hava unasina, not somebody who's missing taking, bringing, and putting. V'zeh mechusar hava, and yet if the person would shave at the gate of Nicanor, at Shari Nicanor, as suggested, because he's shaving at the gate of the Ohel Moed, well, then he would be missing Hava. Ohel Moed, because the Ohel Moed, Ad Makom Shehu Mavashel Hashlamim, Belishkas HaNazirim, because he would have to bring it from the Ohel Moed, from the gate of the Ohel Moed, all the way to the Lishkat Nazirim, to the special room that is associated with Nazirim, where there is the cooking of the shlamim happening, and that is where the hair gets burned. So Ika de Amri, there are others who say that Rabbi Yitzchak's statement isn't quite that way, but gets us to the same point. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer b'shlamim akasav medaber. Again, pasuk is telling us about the shlamim. Ata Omer b'shlamim akasav medaber oenu ela pesach o moed. Ma'amish. But in the second, you want to say that it's talking about the maybe it's actually talking about the gate to the Ohel Moed, namely Shar Nicanor in the Beit Hamikdash, which opens into the inner courtyard. Talmud Lomar. So therefore, the pasuk comes to say v'lakach es arosh nizro, that it's where you take it, and he shall take the hair of his head. Makom shahaya mivashel sham haya megalech, where he is going to do the cooking of the shlamim, that is where he's going to shave his head. So again, two different approaches, two different kinds of language, but the bottom line is the same. Rabbi Yitzchak says that we don't have to use just plain logic, and we don't have to use a kal v'chomer from the fact that there are no steps to the mizbeach, but rather the psukim themselves hint at the fact that you cannot have shaving right at the gate, because then you would need an extra step to get the hair to where it's going to be burned. Okay. So now that we've done that, the Brisa is going to tell us some additional lessons that we learn from these psukim, or that other Tanaim learn from these psukim. So Abba Chanan Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer. So Abba Chanan says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, V'gilach HaNazir Pesach Ohel Moed, that what do we learn from the fact that the person is supposed to shave at the entrance to the Ohel Moed? Kol Zman She'ein Pesach Ohel Moed Pasuach, that when the door to the Ohel Moed is not open, well, then he's not allowed to shave. So at nighttime and at other times that if the door is not open, well, then he would not be allowed. It would not be appropriate for the person to shave. And it doesn't necessarily have to do, again, he's trying to say This can't possibly have anything to do with the location of the shaving. So why is it that we specifically mention it? Maybe it's not based on the fact that we're trying to offer the shlomim, but rather it's based on the fact that we need to make sure that the shaving happens when the doors are open. Rabbi Shimon Shizuri Omer, and then finally Rabbi Shimon Shizuri says, the Gilach HaNazir Pesach Ol Moed. What does he take away from that pasuk? The lo Nazirah. He actually takes it somewhat literally. Maybe, in fact, it is. And this is just a rule for a Nazir. A Nazir, a male Nazir, needs to shave there. But a female Nazir, as we turn to Memhei Amabet, Shema Yisgaru Va Pirkei Kahuna. We have to be worried that maybe people look at her inappropriately. The other Kohanim, especially the young Kohanim, will look at her inappropriately. And so as a result, that's going to be a problem. So 1 second, everybody asked him, Amar lo, lidvarecha sota tachiach. Well, 1 second, we have a sota in an inappropriate dress condition where we pull off her head covering and we say that, and yet we don't say that we're worried about the Kohanim.
Not just her head covering.
Yeah, yes, 100%, more than just her head covering. Fair point. That they actually expose her to some degree. To deceive Hashem, because we say that we have to put her before Hashem, and we, and again we uncover her head, and we do more than that. We expose her breasts. So below Chayshinan Shema Yisgaru Va Pirkei Kahuna, shouldn't we be concerned about the young Kohanim that they might have the wrong thoughts? So Amar Lahen, Shimon Shizuri responds, no, Zo Kocheles Upocheses. Look, the one who's a Nazirah, she's able to make herself up and look nice because she's coming to the Beit HaMikdash. Zo Eino Kocheles Upocheses. But whereas the Sota, the whole point of it is to not have her look attractive, is to have her be on some level repulsive. And so as a result, that is why we are not going to be concerned in that case. So, okay, so now we continue with the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah continues the concluding ritual. So we've now taken the hair, we've put it on the burner, and not only do you do that, but Hayanotel Sa'ar Rosh Nizro Umishaleach Tachas Hadud. And what you do is you throw it beneath the pot where the shlomim is being cooked. But if in fact he shaved outside the Beit HaMikdash and outside Yerushalayim, meaning all the way outside of all three camps, well, lo haya mishaleach tachas hadud, then he would not bring it under, he would not put it underneath the pot. And Tosfos helps us understand this. If we take a look at lo haya mishaleach tachas hadud, it says nira de mikomakom pshita le'latana. It's obvious to this opinion the ahani pashtuk dekra that we have to follow the reading of the simple reading of the pasuk. Demashma de Yerushalayim hu megalech, which implies that you are shaving in Yerushalayim. Yes, we're not having you shave at the gate itself, but you have to shave somewhere in Yerushalayim. Im hayam megalech bigvulin. But if in fact you were to shave in the outer area outside of Yerushalayim, lo hayam megalech tachas hadud, you're not going to throw the shavings underneath the fire. Diksiv bikra, because it says in the Torah, the gilacha nazir pesach ol moed, vilakacha se'ar rosh nizro, v'nasan al ha'esh, right? Asher takas zebach hashlamim, that he needs to put it on the fire underneath his shlamim. V'ikatana didarish b'gemara yatzazeh shemachusar lekicha hava unesina, as we saw in the Gemara that he's missing the hava. V'hachinami machusar havas sa'aro michutz liYerushalayim letitem takas dud hashlamim b'Yerushalayim. So this person, just as we said earlier, that in the Gemara, that the person is missing the taking of the hair, or of the hava, the bringing of the hair from one place to another. So too, this person would be missing the bringing of the hair from outside Yerushalayim to Yerushalayim. So that's why the Tana and Kama in this case will say that in fact you cannot bring it from outside Yerushalayim. So b'medvar mamurim. And all this is only when we're talking about the head shaving of tahara. But when it comes to head shaving of tuma, where the person needs to, where the Nazir needs to shave their head at the end of their tahara process when they go from being tameh made to becoming tahor again. So then they don't throw their hair underneath the pot. And Rabbi Meir says, so again, the Tanakama says that the only person who throws their hair underneath the pot is a tahor nazir if they shave their head in Yerushalayim. Whereas Rabbi Meir says, hakol mishalchen takas hadud, everyone throws their hair underneath the pot, chutz min hatamei shebimedina bilvad. The only exception is somebody who is tamei mate, who shaves outside of Yerushalayim, as we see in the Tosos. Rabbi Meir Omer Hakol Mishalchem Takas Adud Bein Nazir Tahor b'Medina. It doesn't make a difference whether the person is a Nazir Tahor and outside of Yerushalayim. Of course, if they're inside Yerushalayim, he would as well. Ubein Nazir Tamei b'Mikdash, or a Nazir Tamei that is in the Beit HaMikdash. Both of them would throw their hair underneath the pot. So, okay, so now that we've got these two different opinions, the Gemara is going to quote some additional detail regarding this procedure, and then we'll quote a brisa that offers a third opinion that is not mentioned in our mission. So no,
Question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So so by this logic, we need to define what Yerushalayim means.
Yes, most definitely. We would need to define what Yerushalayim means, 100%, and it presumably it would mean the entire populated space outside the Har Habayit, right? So the inner courtyard is and the structures themselves, that's considered like the Mishkan. Then you have the Har Habayit, which is considered like the Levite camp, and then everything else in Yerushalayim is the Israelite camp. And so presumably wherever you would end the population, that would be my immediate take, would be where you would have the borders of Yerushalayim.
A lot bigger now than it used to be.
Yes, a lot bigger now than it used to be. And so a wonderful thought that, God willing, we should have the opportunity to have it make a difference in the world of our service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so Nalto Sa'ar Rosh Hanizra. So the person's going to take their hair of their head and they're going to throw it underneath. And so Tana Rabbanan, Va'akar Kach Notel Et Harotiv. Not only does he take the hair, but he takes a little bit of the sauce that the shlomim is cooking in. V'nosein al Sa'ar Rosh Nizro. And he puts it on that cut hair. And then he throws all of that mixture underneath the shlamim. You can understand why, right? That might, first of all, adding some liquid to that hair will cause it to all stick together, which will make it easier to do the tossing of the hair underneath the pot. And it might, I'm now making this up, but it might also help with the stench, because of course burning hair it smells terrible. So might help with that as well. But I haven't done any scientific projects to confirm that. But all right, the im shilach tachas hadud et shalchatas va'asham, and if one were to throw it underneath the sin offering or the asham offering, yatsa, then he will have fulfilled. And of course, this now helps us understand Rabbi Meir's position, because Rabbi Meir said that you throw even a tamei Nazir would throw his cut hair underneath the fire. But the problem is that a tamei Nazir doesn't offer a shlamim. He offers an ola, a chatas, 2 birds, and an asham, an asham Nazir, a special asham for a Nazir. And so as a result, that is, so now we understand that it could be that you're throwing it underneath the chatas or asham, the meat that is being cooked from those for the kohanim. So then in that situation, you have still fulfilled the obligation to throw. Now we're going to ask the question, asham ben nazir tahor mi'ika? Now again, in this brisa, it seems to be talking about a nazir tahor. Is there in fact an asham at all? No, of course not. So Amaravi Hachin Kamar. This is what Rabbi says. The im nazir tamei mishalech takas hadud shel asham yatsa. That no, what we're talking about is if the nazir casts it underneath the pot of the asham, he's fulfilled his obligation. So it doesn't. He has basically 2 options when he's a nazir tamei. He can either do the asham or he could do the chatas. Although I'm not sure that chatas actually has any meat that is cooked. So it may be that he would have to do the asham in that situation. So, okay, so minahani, the other possibility is that he holds onto the hair until he becomes a full, he's able to do a tiglachat tahara, a shaving in a state of tahara. And so as a result, then there will be obviously a shlomim at that time when he's done with his nazirut. All right, so minahani mili, how do I know all of this? So Amar Rabba explains, because what does the pasuk say? Amar Kra asher tachas sevach hashlamim, that you need to put it underneath the hair that is underneath the shlamim sacrifice. But we didn't need to say it was zevach. We could have just said asher tachas hashlamim, that's underneath the shlamim. Mizivcho yehei taktab, that by adding zevach, it's telling us that we had to take some of the sacrifice to be underneath. And of course, you can't take the sacrifice itself, because the sacrifice itself that is now being cooked cannot be wasted. And so as a result, you can't take from the sacrifice itself. So we take from the rotate, from the sauce that it's cooking in. The im shilach. And of course, the Brisa said that if he throws it underneath the sin offering, that's okay. Well, my time, why is it sufficient if it's underneath the sin offering and not the shlamim? Because after all, the pasuk itself references the shlamim. Well, Amar Kra Zebach, the pasuk tells us that it says Zebach, l'rabot et hachatas v'asham. That comes to include whether it's a sin offering or an asham. Both of them are okay to throw underneath, even if it's not the shlamim. Well, 1 second, we use the extra word zebach in order to tell us about the gravy. So how do we get to use the same word twice? You can't. So im kain lema kra mirotav hashlamim. Well, no, the pasuk could have just said that you should take from the sauce of the shlamim. So why does it say zevach hashlamim? Because shma mina l'rabos chatas v'asham. That tells us that it could be underneath the chatas and an asham. Ve'ema kul l'chatas v'asham hudasa. And maybe you'll say that the whole concept of zevach is only telling us about the being able to throwing the hair underneath the different sacrifices, and not about telling us that you need to use some of the sauce itself. Well, in kain lema shlamim v'zevach. It could have just said that you should throw it underneath the shlamim or a zevach or another sacrifice. My zevach hashlamim. Why does it specifically say in an, again, unnecessary manner, these shlamim sacrifice? Shma mina tarti. So we learned two things. One, you got to take from the shlamim sauce, and two, you got to throw it underneath any of the various korbanot that are offered. And now we'll conclude with the brisa that shows that there's actually a third opinion. So Tana Rabbanan, hakol hayu mishalchen tachas hadud chutz mitameg shegilach b'medina mipnei shesaro nikbar divrei Rebbe Meir. So Rebbe Meir, who is the last opinion in our Mishnah, is the first opinion in this brisa, and he says that all hair, except for the Nazir who shaves outside of Yerushalayim, all hair gets thrown underneath the pot, and the hair that is shaved outside of Yerushalayim, that gets buried. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda says no. Rabbi Yehuda offers a different opinion. Tahorim kan v'kan hayu mishalchen. Does it make a difference whether you're in Yerushalayim or out of Yerushalayim? This is the new opinion. If you are a tahor nazir, so then it's the end of your period, you bring it and you throw it underneath the pot. Tamein kan v'kan lo hayu mishalchen. But when it comes to a tamei nazir, then you don't throw it underneath the pot, because that's not part of the, because there's no shlamim even. Hakol lo hayu mishalken tachas hadud. Nobody throws it under the pot, chutz min tahor shebemikdash, unless you are tahor and in the mikdash, meaning that you are a nazir tahor, you're at the end of your nazirut, because only that person is doing the performance of the closing ceremony in the appropriate manner, because only that person is doing lakicha and natina. But if you have somebody else, well, who either shaves elsewhere, well, and they're tahor, well, then they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not shaving in the Beit Hamikdash, because again, although it says that one is supposed to shave bishar Oel Moed at the Petach Oel Moed, then we say that at least you have to shave in Yerushalayim. And if you're outside of that, you're going to be doing not only lakicha and natina, but you're going to be doing lakicha hava and natina. And so as a result, Chachamim say that that is not somebody who brings their hair and throws it underneath the fire. And of course, the Chachamim would say that a Nazir Tameh would not do it, because again, the Nazir Tameh is not going through this ceremony. And when we talked about throwing hair underneath the pot of the shlomim, it was in the Torah, that is clearly talking about somebody who is finished with their Nazirut, and unlike a Nazir Tameh. So now that we've done all that, we are going to continue with the ritual, and we will get, God willing, even to the view that says the moment that the Nazir will once again be allowed to drink wine and become Tameh. But to hear exactly when that is, and for that further discussion, you'll have to tune back in, God willing, tomorrow.
Burning hair has a absolutely awful smell.
Yes, that is why I wonder whether that might be part of the reason. I don't know whether burning hair that has been essentially gooped up with the sauce, the liquid in which meat has been cooked, and which presumably smells delicious, whether that can undermine it. But it occurred to me that might be part of the reason for this rule. So that they one can imagine that the rabbis did it the first time without the sauce, and they said, oh, we need to figure out a way to make this smell better. And then they came and realized that there was a biblical source to do it. That's my imagination. I'm just joking from that perspective. Presumably, if in fact this is a halacha l'moshe misinai, or a derivation that is Moshe misinai, then presumably they never made that mistake in the first place. All right, have a wonderful day, and God willing, I'll look forward to continuing our learning together tomorrow.
Thank you.